Clay, are you here?
I'm here. I see you, Tom.
We did it. Technology, huh?
It's always a refresh. A
It's
reset.
just a refresh. Have you tried
every
turning it
time.
on and off again? That's the basic. That's the basic. So the reason I'm going to talk with you today is like you guys have insights as a payment processor. You guys see most of your clients' number that, of course, approve it with it, and it's of course hidden. You can tell a little bit more about that thing.
Yeah.
You see different categories and everything. First of all, just briefly, tell us about Vendo and what you guys are doing.
So Vendo's a payment processor. It's been serving this industry for a long, long time. Probably most of you are familiar with the company, and I'm sure many of you work with us today. Our focus, what's unique about Vendo, is data. So we take the vast amounts of data that are produced in transactions or in failed transactions, and we learn from that data and we help our clients to take better decisions. So that's what's unique about Vendo.
Absolutely. I've been knowing Vendo for probably 5 or 6 years, something like that. It feels like forever. Visit you guys in Barcelona. You had a beautiful roof terrace, but you're also very good at remote working. Just touch on that a little bit.
Sure. So we decided 10 years ago that we wanted to switch to remote working. So even though which was great, at the end, there are only a few people going there because we found that we could build the systems that would help people to work remotely. We found that people didn't really want to do their commute in the end. You know, they would rather be at home, be more effective once their setup was ready. And once we had tools like Atlassian, Basecamp, Weekdone, once we had these tools in place. And, you know, I feel like for us, we put a ton of effort into it. It was a big struggle. There was a lot of resistance. But now we feel very lucky going into this because it's really no change at all. You know, to be
you
at
guys
home
have been prepping,
working.
let's say.
We're preppers. So 6 months of food in the basement, 10 years early on full remote.
100%.
Exactly.
100%. So I'll let you prepare your little presentation and bring in that screen because there is some interesting stuff with your data that you guys are seeing. And it's basically also we can see, let's say we have been in lockdown for 40 days. Most of us have been in lockdown for 40 days. Different countries have done this differently, you know, and more countries are more hit than anybody else. So let's jump into that presentation that you have to show some numbers and how that things are working.
Sure. Yeah, I'd be happy to. So, so about a little bit over a month ago, we did a presentation at our Vendo user conference where we interact with our clients about our kind of plans for the future, our product roadmap. We get into our products and services and all of that. So the last one that we did was on March 20th, and that's available online. And we did an analysis, as you said, of different countries. How did they deal with things? You know, Italy, total lockdown. I think that kind of shocked the world. And then other countries were slower. You had some reversals like the UK, like we're good, herd immunity. And then it's like, whoa, total lockdown again. So what we were most interested in is how do those different decisions on the part of these countries affect sales? How do they affect conversions? How do they affect traffic? And then what we wanted to do was take that information and forecast it so that when you saw a country going into lockdown, you had a pretty good expectation of what was going to happen. So that was the purpose when we did this on March 20th. And that presentation, we can put a link in here, I think somewhere. That presentation was on YouTube, so you can go back and you can look at our forecasts and look at what we were saying. So what we're going to do today, based on the conversations that you and I had preparing for this, Thomas, is update everybody on the state today, and we can do some kind of additional forecasting of what the future will look like. So the question, how are you and how is your industry? So everybody knows their own numbers. And so what I'd like you to do during this presentation is kind of compare or get into your own statistical system, get into your own billing data, and see how you're comparing with the rest of the industry. We're also going to ask a bunch of questions, and you can jump in the chat and give some answers. So we have two hypotheses as a company. One, that this industry is going to be a kind of last man standing. So the last dollars that people have are going to go to this industry. as a kind of, let's say like a cheap vacation or fantasy or escape. Or ideally, there's a kind of short dip where people are able to return back to work and the economy comes back. And this was something that was an overall positive impact on this industry in terms of revenue, in terms of direct sales to consumer revenue, even though there's been devastating effects throughout the industry in many levels, but on that level, positive. So we're going to kind of revisit those two hypotheses at the end, but we'll start with some data. So 25 is an important number to keep in mind. 25 plus minus %. Every number that we give you today is going to have context. So you're going to see it in contrast to how things were before or how things might have been in another country. And that will help you to see a number for what it means for you. So all of this information for a Vendo client is available in the back office. This is what the front door looks like. Here's data tools. And then you have the ability to select and compare. So every piece of data that I'm sharing with you comes from a comparison, which can be assembled anytime, any location, whether it's affiliates or not, different traffic sources, all of these things can be figured out and compared easily on all metrics in one place. So let's start with Italy. Italy, the first with a major lockdown. So that happened on March 9th. Here's the stock market in Milan, huge drop, around a 25% drop. And then this is what we saw for our clients overall. This darker blue line shows the increase in sales that our clients saw. And then the light blue line is our forecast. So we forecasted that the difference was expected to continue, and we'll get to see in a second how that forecast played out. The dark gray line underneath is giving you the historical average for that period. So this is March that you're seeing here. So traffic was up 25%. Interestingly, conversion was flat. So you had 25% more people coming, but they bought at the same rate as before. So it translated directly into a 25% increase in sales. The members cancellations and a decrease in inactivity. So what's happened over the last 40 days since then? So was the forecast accurate? Was it not? The traffic is up 20% and conversion has remained flat in Italy. So now we're going to hop over to Spain. Spain followed Italy shortly after in terms of a total lockdown. I'm in Spain. I'm talking to you from Ibiza right now. And the lockdown's being enforced with fines, with these drones that will follow you around if you wander out of your house and then tell the police where you are and the police come up and fine you. Something like 1 out of every 70 people has been fined in Spain so far. So not a nice situation. I'm telling you, Thomas, it's ridiculous. It's like we have no tax revenue, but we can fine everybody. So we'll keep the government going that way. So Spain went into lockdown on March 14th. Here's the Madrid Stock Exchange, terrible drop, just like you saw everywhere. And then here was the Spanish sales across the Vendo universe, so all of our clients. And you see this huge spike as lockdowns introduced, and then the same kind of forecast going forward. So what have we seen since then? Well, what did we see there? That was traffic up 25%. And then interestingly, in Spain, it's a much better picture for the industry because conversion also increased by 25%. So many more people showing up, many more people buying.
Interesting.
Yeah. And so the member net change reflects that.
Yeah.
Many, many more people with few cancellations. So what's happened in the last 40 days in Spain? Traffic has maintained at 22% above where it was previous to the lockdown. And conversion is still up at 22% too. So we're seeing a kind of consistent behavior from what we saw in the first, well, when we did the conference, it was March 20th. So we'd only seen 6 days of data, and that's carrying forward. So we we kind of are getting a picture of an industry of what lockdown looks like in terms of the effect on consumers. We wanted to kind of contrast this with some other countries that were taking a different approach. And Asia and South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, Hong Kong, you had really active and have really active tracking and tracing and testing. So they would test people. If you got sick, they would look through your phone records and say, who are you close to? And then reach out to everybody. And so they didn't have to do the same lockdown. They weren't as restrictive as in Europe and now in many parts of the States. So one of the questions that we want to ask you, and one of the questions we were asking ourselves, is what effect would that have on traffic and sales? So I think, Thomas, we just want to put this out to the chat, give ourselves 30 seconds or so, and get a kind of consensus from the industry, the part of the industry that's here, and see how it compares with the real data.
Yeah. So what do you guys think? What happens in South Korea, Singapore, Taiwan, and Hong Kong? Is it going up, guys, or do you think it's crashing with all of this thing?
So we have Mitch saying, I think business is going up.
Yeah.
Okay.
Ila saying that it's going up. Thomas Peterson saying it's going up. From what time period? It's the last 40 days that we've been in lockdown.
So yeah, we're going to look at the first 10 days after and then the last 40 days. So we're going to look at both. Okay, so we got going up as a consensus. So I think what we're seeing is a kind of prediction that it goes up even though people aren't on lockdown. So it would be driven by something else. It would be driven by kind of anxiety or something else, but people are able to kind of live their normal lives. So it's not like they have much more time on their hands like they do in full-on quarantine. So what we saw in the 10 days before and the 10 days after each country started experiencing COVID-19 is that traffic only went up 5%. So, which is not a significant amount at all. And conversion was slightly up. Conversion was up at 10%. So then what we said is, okay, what's going to happen 30 and 60 days out? And our guess was that there would be a maintained increase in traffic and conversion, so slight, but there. And then after 60 days, traffic and conversion would return to normal.
Okay.
And what we've seen over the last 40 days is traffic is flat and conversion's flat. So essentially, once you have track and trace and you're out of quarantine, the example of these countries is that, in fact, business returns to normal. It's not down, it's not up. Life is normal. This industry is experiencing traffic and sales of a normal level. So let's talk about the US.
Which is, of course, a very, very important target for us in our industry.
Yeah, hugely important, massive market, 350 million people. And on March 20th, we saw obviously the stock market take a huge hit, but then we saw no change in traffic because the US was not under any kind of lockdown or quarantine at that time. Conversion was up 7%. Okay, slight increase, great. So quarantine, what happened? So now that we've had a chance to kind of look at two contrasting examples, the Asian countries and then the Southern European countries, I think we can come in and give some more guesses here. So what do you think happened in the US after quarantine was set up?
Let's see what people are saying. There we go. Up, also up, big up. There's a lot of ups, way up, they say.
Okay, so we're seeing a consensus around up. Grow for sure in the USA. Sure. Great.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're all right. So in quarantine over the last 40 days, we saw traffic go up 25%. You see that number appearing again. That is the quarantine number. And then conversion is up 26%. So the US is following the figures that we saw in Spain. Another question, or another country, which is sort of a strange case. In here, there's really no quarantine, but they are kind of, in Europe and sort of watching everything in Europe happen. This is Sweden. What kind of results do we expect for Sweden?
What do you guys think about Sweden? This is my neighbor.
Yeah,
this is my neighbor country. You know, the inventor of IKEA and meatballs. And it's a bit crazy over there when we have been watching over the border with the Swedish people, actually. And it's very interesting the way the approach of everybody getting the virus kind of a strategy than not having a lockdown at all. So we also saw a huge rise of what do you say, luxury tourists coming to Sweden to do their haircuts. They came all the way from Europe over there because the border is open and did their haircuts there, because the rest of us, we need to wait for a haircut a couple of weeks more. And then they went back again. So yeah, no change for Sweden, they say.
Okay, no change. So we weren't sure. We're going to give you the data just now. So here's Sweden. In the last 40 days, we've seen traffic up at 16%. And we've seen conversion flat. So this is somewhere in the middle in terms of results. I think that could reflect the sort of voluntary nature of what's happening in Sweden, where they're saying, we're not going to fine you if you go out, but you should stay at home. And people are kind of following that. So that's a sort of middle path. And I think that's interesting to think about as many countries start to open again, because I think you're going to see something much similar to Sweden than you'll see in other places. Like in Spain, they'll stop finding you at some point. They'll just say, okay, you're kind of on your own reconnaissance. So we can see a kind of slow decrease in traffic that can come from that.
People will start going back to their office. People will have other things to do, than visiting our sites in our industry. And there's going to be some changes, I think.
So that's an overview of some of the countries that we've seen. To see your own data, you can log into your back office. You'll see a number of other things there as well, other things that we're doing with data that aren't directly related to COVID, but help you get a picture of your business. One is alerts and drivers, which allows you to see your daily revenue and then what caused the change to your daily revenue. So if there's a percentage drop, what did it come from? Which is really useful because that can be an emotional and kind of unnerving thing to experience. And we're going to do a session where we get into this, or maybe a couple of sessions, Thomas, on that here at the show.
Yeah, there's 3 sessions going on today by Vendo. So the first one is actually starting very soon. So the ones that wants to jump into that one can talk about my revenue is going down and what you guys are looking into there. We also have how do you compare to other, which you touched on here, is the benchmarking tool that you guys have. And we also have this beautiful thing of how you guys see the future. So recommend totally to jump into the session area after you're done with this and jump in and see there. And of course, this will be recorded. And also, I think we will do this again tomorrow with these 3 sessions if you missed some of the sessions today.